our meeting so far. So the fees have gone up from 55 to 75 on that, so they actually probably will grow into that budget number.
And to add to that, just because our office provides the attorneys for the child support office, we will probably be filing more cases as the county grows and increases in people. We have more cases, so the more cases that need to be served and the cost going up, that's probably a justifiable amount.
And if I could just clarify for process, if the supervisors would like to just address their questions to the administrator and he can call on people, you don't have to go through the chair for questions on the budget. If it was a process issue or anything else, feel free to address them to me, but otherwise directly to the administrator is just fine.
Keep this meeting moving. Yeah. All right. We'll move on to tab 11 then, which is the sheriff's office. Who's well represented here this morning. So starting on page 79. Why don't we take this one cost center by cost center? So 79 and 80 is the law enforcement, which is basically your patrol investigation administration part of the sheriff's department. Are there any questions on pages 79 or 80? Supervisor Shirley.
Teletype services. Why are we seeing such a huge increase there?
Yep. I didn't remember when you asked me before. I had to ask the sheriff again. So it's actually, they reallocated that out of the communications budget into the sheriff's department. So the sheriff's department is made up of 3 divisions, 4 cost centers. So they have basically their sheriff, the law enforcement patrol part, they have the corrections part, and they have the communications or civilian part of their department. So those are the 3 divisions within the sheriff. And the 4 cost centers then that match up with that are the law enforcement, which is this 2110, 2700 is corrections, we'll do that one next. And then we also have 2 additional ones, which is communications, which is the 911 dispatch center, and then emergency management, which we list out as a separate cost center. We list those as separate cost centers because basically our income tax return that the county does, reporting to the state every year, has us break them out into those 4 sections. Even though we're organized under 3 divisions. So we shifted some of the costs, though, from communications to the sheriff's department. That's where the increase was. It was just a move from one part of the budget to another. Yep, Supervisor Attino.
Yes, is there a way that we can pull money back from what we designated to go into the KIP program to give to the sheriff's department to add patrol cars and sheriff? Is it possible?
Theoretically, anything is possible. So what I'm going to tell you, though, is if you're going to use one-time money to fund additional law enforcement deputies, is you create a structural deficit the next year. So a deputy is going to cost us $150,000 for every deputy that you add. So you have to find that through operational savings, not through application of cash, because you're just going to dig a hole for the following year. And I do have a long-term plan to address that specific need. I'm actually going to talk at the next public protection about some of the options that we have available for us, because I understand the need for that. But I think that's a 2024 issue.
Okay.
When we refocus on new budget priorities for 2024, new positions, I keep telling you, I'm going to ask you new positions be the top priority for the county, because at the rate of our growth, we have to start adding some staff. So I'm going to ask for that to be the #1 priority.
And especially, I would say, #1 of the #1 priority to be the sheriff's department. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep, and I agree with Supervisor Otino on that.
Yeah.
In that regard. Like, it's just, crime is up all across this county, so.
Yep. And I've been talking with Supervisor Fiedler about my ideas, so tune into the next public protection. We're going to introduce what the options are for us to do for that.
Well, could I make the motion then to...
There's no motions.
Well, not the motion, excuse me. The recommendation to pull for the first year, which would be 2023, and then let the budgetary process pick up that for the 2024 and going forward.
Okay.
So we would add the protection sooner, 1 year sooner, as to 1 year later.
Right. I understand the request. So how many would you like to add? It's $150,000 per patrol deputy.
least one.
Oh, not at least one, yeah. I was looking at cars, and if I thought it was with cars and officers, and maybe the sheriff could give us a number, because I know,
Is anyone? There he is.
You could ask the sheriff for a number,
Yeah.
but
180, and that's with a car? 180.
okay.
Let's go by 180 by 4 is my recommendation to the group.
For 2023,
Yep.
that's $750,000.
And we put 3 million in the KIP program. So pulling $750,000 out is not an out of range request.
But really, I mean, we have no, I mean, we have rules of decorum, but we don't really have, like, we can talk back and forth. So Rick, the only issue I see with 4 is we have to pull it out of we have to find it in this. If we pull it out of our undesignated fund balance and we don't pull it out of this, everything's off like by $750,000 minimum going into 2024. So, I mean, I'm with you on it, and I think we need way more than that, but.
Do you agree
Am I
with
wrong on that?
Supervisor Burning's assessment?
Yeah, he's absolutely correct. What I would tell you is the ideas that I have, I need another 6 to 8 months to hash out. But it would be something that we could potentially do mid-year next year. If everything works out and the ideas are fruitful, it would be something that we could do a budget amendment for and spend the cash, because the cash is just there. You can reallocate it at any time. So the cash would be there, that you could do a budget amendment mid-year next year to add deputies before the end of 2023. It's just that I'm not prepared today
Okay.
to say that we would have the resources to do that.
Thank
I
you very
wanna
much, and I'll pull my recommendation.
And I'd just add that I'll concur with what the administrator said. We do have a long-range plan that we're working on at PPJ, and I agree with everything the administrator just said. I think we will see some substantial additions in the intermediate term.
If I may also just throw this out there regarding the need for patrol. One, you heard Lieutenant Coleman come up and talk about how a lot of those officers and those deputies right now are not using their PTO because they have to be out in the field. They have to be patrolling. We don't have a lot of patrol in St. Croix County. So I think if we can find 500 here, 250 there, 1,000 here, and somehow get up to at least one more relief for those guys. I mean, look at the caseload. Talk to Carl. I mean, it's just spilling over from the Twin Cities. It's not stopping. So I think we should try to find 180 with the savings that we find and get those guys some relief.
I'd like to suggest that it's most appropriate that we leave this issue to the Public Protection Committee and have them review a variety of different options. And as Ken said, we'll probably be able to act on that to impact the 2023 budget at some point. But I think it's best to leave it to the committee to really work through a variety of different options. I don't think we don't know what these options are at this point, so it's probably not the best time for us to be voting on this.
The sheriff and I have spent, a bit of time really just in the past week, really starting to work through some of these things. So we do want to bring you a plan with supporting information that's going to support what you guys are feeling. But we'll bring you the data to support that, and we think that'll be the best way forward. So I absolutely hear you, and we are working towards that. Any other questions then on page 79 or 80 within Cost Center 2110, law enforcement?
Okay, but other professional services, no.
Yep, that's the next one. All right, so we'll move on to the next cost center, which is 2700. This is the Corrections and Detention Cost Center, the jail. So pages 81 and 82. And other professional services, just in case you had a question on that, that is the jail medical contract. So that is up substantially because we've just signed a new jail medical contract. So that is the number. You can change it if you want, but that's how much we're going to spend. Any other questions? So, and this was, if you saw the request at 665, 800, and then I reduced it to 538, we were able to knock that amount out because of the action that the county board took to fund a behavioral health person full-time embedded in the jail to provide mental health services. So we were able to reduce the contract amount and end up with a savings for the county by that action of the county board. So I appreciate you guys approving that. Supervisor Adams.
I'm just curious, on line 52940, laundry services, the increase on that?
Yeah, the laundry services have increased. If you look at the historical trend, we spent $43,000 last year. 3/4 of the way through, we're just under $30,000. So we're right on target to spend that $45,000 roughly per year. So I did not alter the budget amount that they requested on that. The trend line history has pointed us that we're going to spend that much. Not seeing any other questions then on corrections. We'll move on to 2510, which is emergency management, pages 83 and 84. No questions in emergency management? Yep. Supervisor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why the grant monies went down. Is that just because the state's grant went down? It's line,
Yeah, 43510.
yeah.
Janet.
Supplemental COVID.
There's a supplemental COVID grant that we had budgeted for previously. It's actually back down to more consistent with what we've experienced in past years, though. No other questions on that? We'll go to 2600, emergency communications, pages 85 and 86 within your budget books. This is our 911 center. Questions on page 85? Yep, Supervisor Burning.
So electricity, gas for heating, and telephone dictaphone, all have not, well, I should say 2022 is not even close. Is that something that fluctuates wildly? And then also with electricity and gas for heating, like, that was wildly over budgeted for 2022.
Yeah.
So what is that? Maybe not wildly, but like, let's talk about that, please.
And that's for, those are the different tower sites that we're providing that electricity and gas for.
So like Ken indicated, them are the tower sites, and with the cost of electricity going up, I have no control over it, whether it's the air conditioning, with all that equipment in there, we've got to keep it in that spectrum of 70 to 80 degrees for all the electronics, the batteries for the backup power in between the generators starting. And with the utility increases that they're saying are coming, we elevated to that point. So that's where, and currently what we spent is where we're at currently.
So those are all brand new, 3 years ago maybe now we finished that project?
2017 was when they were put in.
Yeah. So I agree with you that we were probably over budget on that, but we've been growing into that budget. Which, the nice thing about that is we don't have increases to do it. And these are some of the line items that end up contributing to that unassigned fund balance at the end of the day, because we've been under. But we are starting to grow into these dollar amounts now. We'd probably still be a little bit under next year, but getting closer. No other questions on emergency communications. We'll move on to tab 12. Are there any questions on Corporation Council under tab 12? pages 89, 90. Yep, Supervisor Burning.
Office supplies, managed print cost. And then even staff development. Help me, Heather.
Yes, staff development, most of our conferences are in September and October, and so it looks like we didn't use any staff development money, but we just went to those conferences in September and October, so those numbers are different now than they were when the budget book was printed. The managed print costs could probably be reduced some. We are trying to go more electronic and not print as much, and so we've been just saving documents instead of printing them to paper files, and our hope and our goal is to eventually get software so we don't have to print hardly any documents and can go completely remote and electronic. So I think the managed print costs could probably be reduced by $400 down to $1,000. And what was your other question?
Office supplies.
Office supplies, can you give me 100?
So I am not sure, again, this is my first year as Corporation Counsel, so you could reduce it to 400. That's just paper, pens, staples, those types of things. And again, because we are trying to go more electronic, you could probably reduce that from 500 to 400.
Do you have any new expenses in 2023 that you really hadn't anticipated when you put this budget together?
Yes, and that's under the cell phone costs. You'll see that's a $500 increase. So I do have a cell phone that was increased. And then
I was talking about maybe some software that your office
oh,
is
for
gonna need.
2023, yes. Our office does not have case management software, so we track everything by paper and Word documents. So we have no ability to track our cases electronically. I've been working with Administrative Witt and the IT Director, John Allegro, to hopefully get case management software into our budget. So you will see that increase hopefully for 2024, maybe partially way through 2023. But an initial cost for software is about $15,000 to implement and get started, and then there'll be ongoing costs each year. But that will be an increase that I'll be asking for just because we don't have any way to track cases, and the cases keep increasing, and doing it by paper is not efficient.
Supervisor Long.
With all due respect, can we please keep in mind the impact of a couple $100 on a $114 million budget? Keep this moving. Thank you.
Any requested changes to Corporation Council? All right. We'll move on then to tab 13, which is administration. So starting on page 93. So there's a lot of insurance funds. We'll focus just on the cost center, 1410 though to begin with. Are there any requested changes to administration? Yep, Supervisor Shirley.
Advertising and promotion and employee lodging. Those are my two.
Yep. So the advertising and promotion, we just moved that to 20,000 last year in anticipation of a lot of things that we want to start doing with communications with our public information officer. We just haven't gotten to a lot of those yet, but he does have a list of items that he would like to spend that amount on. We've talked about doing communication newsletters out to the community. We've talked about other ways of promoting and advertising the county, some additional software packages that would probably be needed to track it, some additional social medias, whether we create Instagram page, which then ends up with costs because we have to open records retention, we have to retain those types of images. So different things there. So that is the dream to grow into that. We just haven't gotten there yet. And then the other one was on lodging. Yep. Yeah. So that covers enough for an in-state and an annual conference. I haven't gone to it in the last couple of years. But typically I would go to it. I just, because of the COVID pandemic, I haven't.
On the advertising and promotion, do you think it would be prudent to cut that down to 10,000 until we actually start seeing some things come into fruition, and then we can revisit that down the road? I mean, I just think we budgeted 20,000 for 22, and we're not even close to realizing that. So even doubling what the effort that was made this year wouldn't even, at this point, get us to 10.
Right.
So do you think, I mean, would anyone be with me in finding 10,000 there?
Yep. Chair Long.
Yeah, part of the discussions around this have been to do more outreach to our taxpayers and our citizens. They don't really have a clue what's going on here. We like to think they do, but they really don't. So what we're trying to do is anticipate trying to get them information so they have a better idea of how their tax dollars are being spent, have a better idea of our budget and where the budget dollars are going, and trying to increase our transparency to our taxpayers and our constituents. And I think that's the motivation behind that, and I think that's critical and really important and something that we've really done a poor job of in the past.
To that, I mean, part of that does fall on us too as elected officials to go back and talk to our constituents in some capacity. So not that I don't disagree with you in that case, but at the same time, like, we should be doing that too as supervisors, is talking to our constituents. Like, that's important. So anyway.
Yep, and that is an important piece of the overall communications. We're looking at really building on the foundation that we're laying. So if you looked at the new website that we just launched, we launched the overall design, which makes things easier to find, but now we're working with all the content managers to clean up that content. As we're cleaning up all that content, we're looking at supplemental communication materials. So printed materials that we have, like rack cards outside of the offices. We'll look at information that we could put at libraries, so people who don't readily have access to online materials, they have those. We are shifting a lot of the cost to shifting a lot of the effort to digital. So that's really kind of keeping that cost down. 20,000 is a relatively modest amount for just communications in general. I know organizations about 500 people and more, they're looking at about 180,000 for internal. I'm not asking anywhere near that, but looking at where I'm planning on going between now and the end of the year and the beginning of next year, I would definitely be comfortable dropping that down, 5,000, 6,000. And then I think that gives us a lot of room to work with and to realize some of those things that Ken was talking about.
Thank you, Adam.
Yep.
Request?
Yeah, if Adam's willing to do that for 2023, let's look at reducing it by 5,000. And then reevaluate it at the end of the year, see how effective it was, and work in tandem as elected officials with him to get that out as well.
Can I ask one question, though?
Yep.
This is for Bob Long, our chair. Is this something the administration committee had covered?
I believe we've talked about it. I know I've had numerous discussions with Supervisor Cook about it. I'm not sure, quite
We had a
frankly.
presentation by the PIO about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, right.
So we talked about some of the ideas that we have that we want to work on.
But
and
nothing
what he's done.
specific.
Yeah.
And then
But
it was something covered in the budget presentation during your committee meeting?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
We did cover it during the committee meeting, in the budget presentation, in the administration committee meeting. Is that right? As a line item, you would have had it presented to you, right?
We would have, but I don't believe it was discussed.
Okay. My point being, that was 5 minutes of my life I'll never get back for a simple $5,000 off of this huge budget. And I think we're being petty.
So in reply to that, that's $60,000 an hour.
Supervisor Cook.
Yeah, I would like to see the 20,000 stay where it is. I agree with Adam. It's a very modest request for a communication strategy. We have a large county. It's quite spread out. We continually hear from our stakeholders that they want to know what's going on. We should be more transparent. This is an opportunity to do that. And one of the things that we did add to the administrator's work plan this year is a piece about sharing more information about the budget itself and making it more visible on the website. And I would like us to see potentially looking at investing in software. There's a lot of cities that are doing, and counties that are doing amazing things with the way that you can interactively look at the budget and say, oh, here's this section, versus going through this whole giant budget document, which we know that a lot of people really won't go through. So I would support keeping this at $20,000 so we have the tools that we need to communicate.
I think communicating to our constituents is critical. And I'll say again, I think we've done a poor job of it in the past, and I think it's an area that we really need to improve on. So I would certainly suggest that we leave that 20,000. I think it will be well spent, and anything we can do to more further educate our constituents on what we're doing here and how we're spending their money, we can't go wrong.
All right. Supervisor Van Summer.
I agree with you, Bob, but I think maybe you're missing the point. I think, last year we had $20,000 in that and nothing came of it. I think the question really is, if we leave $20,000 in, are we going to see something by the end of the next year? Thank you.
All right. We have a request to reduce the advertising promotion, line 53220, from 20,000 to 15,000. Support for that idea. Okay, that fails. All right, why don't we take a break then? 10.
Take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at exactly 10:15. If people could take their seats, we'll get underway in about a minute. I have an observation to make about where we're at. Roughly, we've gone through half the sections. Now, I know that that doesn't represent necessarily all the different departments, and I know that there are thoughtful recommendations that people might make and questions. But we've saved about $12,000. Now, one of the goals I know that many people in the room have is to ease the burden of tax payments, a tax levy on our citizens. And I've talked with the administrator before and with the chairman, and I know that we can live with a very substantial tax cut. And if we want to achieve a tax cut, we might be able to go right to the heart of it here. And I'll ask the administrator if he agrees with this and how we might do it. But I think we can have a very substantial tax cut that this group would approve, that the administrator can live with, and just leave the operating budget as it is, but give direction to the administrator in our budget priorities for next year that the various chiefs of the various divisions will look at every line item extremely carefully and be able to justify it very, very carefully, both in their initial meetings with us, and in the September meeting, and obviously in a future October COTW, so that we combine a major tax cut with direction to look at the line items for next year. And I believe that we can cut as much as $400,000, which is a huge tax cut. That's only been done once in the last decade at this county. Okay, but we were able to do it then. The administrator can do it now, I believe. But I asked the administrator to come up and see, does he agree with that assessment that you could do that? We can have that priority and maybe cut through what we're doing today and reach that conclusion and bring this to a head.
Yep. You can do that. You guys can basically do whatever you want. You guys are in charge here. So if you say you want the tax levy lowered by $400,000, you just tell me that, and then I go figure out how to do that. I have a plan of how we would do that. We would take the cash reserves that we have, and we would apply it against the debt service fund, and the levy would drop by $400,000. It's a very short exercise, actually. So if that's what you want to do, you just have to say that.
So the question to the group, because if we did that, we would basically, I know that a lot of work has gone into other thinking in some of these other sections we haven't gotten to, but the administrator can work with those, he can work with them for the future, and we can have the tax cut now, if we make that direction.
And I'll just add, I think the idea is, let's go and decide on a tax cut rather than going through all this additional detail where 500 here, 1,000 here, 1,000 here. If the end goal is to reduce taxes, then let's work on the end goal rather than drifting through the weeds, so to speak. My question for the administrator would be, is 400,000 palatable? Is a different number more reasonable in terms of the overall budget?
Yeah, it's a consideration of what your priorities are. So we reallocated $3.8 million. We moved $800,000 into the debt service fund. The debt service fund had a negative $375,000 balance. So half of that's going to that. That leaves me about $400,000. Since the tax levy was already going down this year, I did not apply that. But that money is there and available to apply. So about $400,000 is available. If you had a different number, if you wanted a higher number, it would be a reallocation of cash. something Supervisor Rutino sort of alluded to before. So it's whatever amount you want, it's the priorities that you're setting for the county for the use of the resources that we have available.
How would that be realized to the taxpayer in their property tax for the next year?
Yep. So tab 29, page 227 of the budget is the debt service. So you see general property taxes for next year, $10,912,000. So it's page 227 of your budget book. Last sheet of paper in there. They just wanted to jump right to the last page. So $10,912,000 tax levy, general property taxes, right? So that's all just coming from the taxes. So what I would say is you can drop that to $10,512,000. I won't drop the expenses though. What I'll do is I will use a fund balance applied, the line that's not on here currently. Fund balance applied, use cash, so we'll still make the debt payments that we have of $10.9 million, but I won't ask the taxpayers for all that. I'll use the $400,000 sitting in the bank already. Now, my recommendation has always been, and will continue to be, I like to avoid future expenses if at all possible. I want to have a tax levy rate decrease, which we have with this budget already, and then I like to avoid future expenses, because that not only saves me today, but that saves me into the future. So part of the money that we had, we reallocated to the KIP, which is a great way to avoid future expenses for the county. But if you want to just reduce the tax levy at any point in time you can, and this is the easiest and quickest way to do it.
Yep. The only thing I have to add to that is, I mean, if we truly want to look at an overall tax decrease year over year, we have to find $5.2 million. Like that's, because that's the debt service that's being put on to the 2023 budget. So we're going, like by moving the cash, don't get me wrong, I'm all about it, but we have to keep in mind that we're just denting into an increase that's being put on the taxpayers already. So we're not cutting taxes year over year. We're cutting the increase that the taxpayers are going to get saddled with in 2023. So it's good. I'm for it, but I still think we should go through the exercise and find. I think it's our duty, because our duty is two things: set the levy and the budget for the county, and create policy within our statutory means. That's our duty. And so all the department heads that have sat through this, thank you. All the ones that have already been brought up, thank you. But I think we should still go on because we've got other department heads I'd like to talk to. So thank you. That's a great idea. Let's add it. So thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Dan.
Perhaps we should put her to a consensus then, if we could, should continue this exercise, or let supervisors who have questions about individual line items contact their administrator or department heads.
Well, the only thing I'd say to that, Supervisor Hanson, is the fact that we're all here today, and whatever we discuss one-on-one with Ken that goes in as a change to the line item, now it has to be brought back as an amendment. And if we don't have consensus on it, why are we going to put Ken through 8 supervisors, 10 supervisors that are going to go through all these line items and spend his time doing that? That's why we're here. I'd appreciate it if we could do this. Thank you.
Chair Long.
I'll just add, if you really want to continue the process and go through it, that's fine, but can we please try to avoid the small nuance, couple $100 here and there, postage, things that are really going to have absolutely no impact whatsoever on the overall budget. So we can try to focus on more significant, substantive items that do impact the budget and may result in some substantial savings. If we can focus on those issues and not dive so deeply into the weeds, I think this process will go much faster and we can get through the line items that we want to.
Supervisor Leaf.
I had a question for you about the 400,000. So what's the are there negative consequences for us in the future for doing that now? Because if you were interested in doing that, you would have recommended that initially.
Yeah, I'm looking out. My plan was to apply that 400,000 next year because of some of the other things that we're working through in order to maintain a tax levy rate decrease. So that's my goal every year, is that we have consistent downward trajectory of the tax levy rate decrease. And by adding a bunch of positions next year, we could potentially be seeing an increase. So I can artificially reduce it next year to have that savings to keep that rate decrease. So I was kind of keeping that one in my back pocket, but Supervisor Fiedler was looking in my back pocket. And the 10.9 million, that's going to be the debt payment next year also. So the taxes will come back up. It's a one-year artificial lowering of the tax rate. And it sort of creates that structural deficit, although there's no levy limitation. We can go up and down on the debt service. Supervisor Anderson.
Yeah, I think I like the idea with 400,000, and to your point, or Ken, I think there will be, there will likely be, especially with under budgeting sales taxes, a surplus from this year that we could use, that we could do this again next year. That's kind of my thought.
Supervisor Van Summeren.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Burning about it'd be good to do that, but I think we're just prolonging the pain, and we're all here now. Let's go through it. Also agree with Mr. Long. Let's just kick up the rate a little bit. Yeah, that's right. If we save a dime and you divide that by 93,000 people, or however many people we have, that saves not enough to write down. So maybe that's the plan.
All right. So why don't we dive back into the line item detail? I think to Supervisor Hansen's point and Supervisor Burning, the debate that they had is we can either do it today or we're going to end up doing this next Tuesday at the November 1st County Board meeting. So we're here now. Let's continue to move forward. There is a noon meeting in here. If by chance we are not done by noon, we will have to recess for an hour and come back and reconvene at 1 o'clock. So I will see if I can pick up the pace at all for you guys. So we were on page 95, which is unallocated. So what I'm going to tell you, unallocated is just the contingency fund. The next few pages are our self-insured funds. They have no direct tax levy impact. There is no general property taxes. If you had questions on them, I'd be happy to answer. But whatever changes you make on that, I actually don't change the bottom line at all. So I'd recommend tab 14 then, which is the county clerk's budget, pages 105 of your packet book. The county clerk's budget is pretty lean. If you had any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer. The dog fund is in and out. The elections fund is going to be set based upon changing elections, which change every single year. So that number goes up and down. And then you have the county board within that section also. Were there any specific questions on significant dollar line items in any of those sections? Yeah, they're a pretty small budget, really, when you look at the big picture of things. All right, we will move to tab 15 then, which is human resources. So on page 113, 114 of your budget. Questions about human resources? Sort of the center book is a lot of really small departments, but Supervisor Shirley.
Consultant fees.
Yep. Consultant fees, the $20,000 that was added this year to do a reclassification study. So about every 4 to 5 years, we come in, we look at the wage grid, make sure that it's still in line with where it's supposed to be. So it's sort of hit and miss of when it pops up on the budget, but that's what the $20,000 will be spent on next year. Supervisor Anderson?
On consultant, I know that HHS is using extension to help through some of these reviews? Is that something we've looked at for stuff like this?
Oh, no, I mean, the county historically, the last 20 years has used, professional HR consulting firms, Carlson, Detman, and now McGrath, to look at that. That might be a little bit beyond the scope of what something extension could do. I wouldn't mind researching it, but fairly unlikely. Right. No other questions? We'll move on to tab 16, which is information technology. They do spend a whole lot of money, I know, but I guess these computer things are here to stay. We do have like Microsoft licensing, Oracle licensing. We do see a lot of big increases in the software. It's one of the things I had pointed out at the last committee of the whole meeting. But did you have any other questions on line items within information technology? Yep, Supervisor Van Summeren.
On cell phone service, on the bottom of page 114, we had $5,000 we had budgeted last year, spent $44,519. We're a bit above budget there.
Yep.
How does that?
So he's looking at 117 in the budget book. So in the budget book, so we charge all of the cell phones to that, and then we redistribute it back out to the other departments. So it'll come down before the end of the year. It's just an internal accounting sequence that you're seeing right now.
Was that new for this year? Because last year, say, it was at $5,000.
It'll be back to 5,000 by the end of the year. Okay. So we're going to reduce it here, and we're going to distribute it out across all of the other departments so that the cell phones are charged to the cost centers where they're being used.
Okay.
But the bill originally comes into this account, and then we redistribute. So you caught us in the middle of a redistribution cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Tab 17 is the finance department. Challenge you to challenge anything within finance. Yeah.
The software and subscriptions is at our Office 365 and other subsequent software as a service providers that have gone up in cost.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the big ones are Microsoft and Oracle.
Yeah.
The two biggest expenses we have within there. Finance department, page 121 of your budget book. Okay. We'll move on to tab 18. Yep. Yeah. Sorry, trying to move fast.
I get it. I just, so on accounting services, are we going to be at that 65,000 by the end of the year? We're going to be close? Is that stuff that just hasn't billed yet,
absolutely.
I'm assuming?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be right at that 60 to 65,000.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
auditors.
Yep. All right, thank you.
All right, tab 18 is the county treasurer. It's page 127 of your budget book. Really small department, there's probably not much there. But yep, Supervisor Van Summeren.
Ken, what are the bank service charges? I mean,
Yep.
maybe we should look for a different bank if they charge that much. This
Yeah.
must be the Baldwin Bank, but
Yeah. Wells Fargo. Bank service charges are exactly that. It's banking fees. So when you have a personal bank account, they give you a free checking and stuff like that. That's not how corporate banking works. They charge us for every deposit, every check written, every time we call them. So there are just a ton of fees that they charge, and yeah, that's what it costs to run an organization this size through the banking system. We have talked about bidding it out, though, to help try to reduce that cost.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. That is,
Yep.
I mean, Wells is generally designed for entities like us, but a lot of the smaller banks are becoming nimble and catching up in technology and serviceability.
Yeah, some of the smaller.
I think so.
Some of the smaller banks wouldn't be able to handle us. We'd probably only be looking at Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, and maybe one other large bank.
I'm sorry, I wasn't suggesting that we go
Yeah.
to a smaller bank. I'm just saying, as far as serviceability,
Yeah.
the deposits and transactions, they probably would not be able to handle. So I wasn't trying to, sorry if that mixed people up on that.
Tab 19 is the facilities department. So page 131 of your budget book. Any questions on facilities?
I do want to just say oh, I'm sorry. I didn't raise my hand. Did you have somebody else?
Supervisor Van Summeren?
Yeah. Well, my question is on the fuel expense, which is $534.70. We're only at $12,000 or $10,000. Price of fuel is going up. I'm not certain if that's going to cover that this year. And I'm not sure what that fuel probably is used for, but it seems low to me. Page 132.
Yeah. So fuel expense, so you see his request was higher than what I budgeted, and I brought him down because fuel prices had started to decline then.
Ooh,
And so I thought, okay, they're coming back down. Now I know they're going back up a little bit. So I agree with you. We're going to be really tight probably on that line item.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're necessarily looking at increasing any line items in the budget at this point, but point taken. Did you have a question, Supervisor Burning?
No, I just wanted to make a statement on how Jim has been very forthright on the expenses with materials, especially. So he's been very, very open on that. So thank you, Jim.
I agree.
All right, tab 20 is the Highway Department. So highway is going to be a little bit complex. There's probably only two people in this room that know it, and it's not me. But Supervisor Ramberg and Robbie have a great understanding of this. The complexity of it, though, is that there's really only a third of this budget that is property taxes. And you can say, well, I want to cut this. It may not be related to the property taxes side at all. It may be being funded by the state, or it may be being funded by, one of the municipalities we contract with. So it's really hard to take a look at a specific line item and have it change our property tax amount. So I just want to preface any questions that you may have with that. Do you have any questions on cost center 3,000? Yep, Supervisor Otino.
Yes, I went over this same subject that you're talking with Robbie Krejcik, and I tried and tried and tried, but all these miles that we do the maintenance on, it's kind of like, yeah, it costs us money, but then they pay us for it, whether it's the state, whether it's the municipalities. Look at what's happening in Hudson Township with the roundabout. So I wanted to cut something. I couldn't find anything to cut. So, and you know me. The only thing I'd like to preface is, and I would be remiss if I didn't say it, there is no budget now for an increase of the wheel tax going forward. So I'm under the assumption that the wheel tax is going to stay the same until 2024, when the board has the opportunity to address it again. I don't want to see that come back on the table.
Correct. The wheel tax, vehicle registration fee, can only go up by action of the county board.
Thank you.
So nobody else can increase it but you 19 supervisors collectively.
And hopefully not till 2024.
Absolutely, Supervisor Otino. All right, tab 21, we're getting into Health and Human Services. So the 4,000 level that you see on page 152, this is a summary of all of the divisions of HHS. So I mean, if you had a question on these couple of pages, I'd be happy to entertain them, but there's subsections, which are the following pages. If you do have questions, it'd probably be more pertinent to go to the subsection where the question is. So before we open up on HHS, did you have a general question on 152 to 155, the summary part?
Ken, I got a
Yep.
quick question. So bottom of 152 into 153, we're looking at pretty high salary increases.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, about 500,000 of it is increases for positions that were added through the ARPA funding. And so they were not budgeted in 2022 as salaries. We'd actually planned on using contract services, and then ended up switching very early in 2022 and hiring employees. So there's 5 employees, so count 500,000 right away as an increase just for those 5 ARPA-funded positions. And that'll go through 2024. And then the rest of it is just the 5% increase on top of the compensation that they currently have. Yep.
Isn't that spending one-time money and then coming to the next year, having to support them without the funding? Because we just discussed that a little bit ago, that it's not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious as to how we can substantiate that we keep that amount of staffing on.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. Do we keep that amount of staffing on? If we do not have a funding source at the end of 2024 for those 5 positions, those 5 positions will go away. So we have other grant-funded positions throughout this budget. It's not uncommon in county government at all. The positions are grant-funded, and these have a set end date unless there's a different revenue source that covers them. So a lot of these positions are trying new ideas. So these might be really good ideas that are working out, or maybe they won't be. But we're giving it that 3-year trial to determine whether it's something that's beneficial for the county to consider or not. So it's a great way of using our ARPA dollars to test the water on these. Supervisor Shirley.
I have a lot in HHS, but staff development, we've talked about a lot with that. I understand that. If we go through each individual one, yeah, maybe increases here and there, but when you look at the overall on 4,000, we're proposing spending $30,000 more than we did last year.
Yeah, it's almost all in public health because it's a grant-funded increase specifically aimed at training.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to the individual cost centers of HHS, just in case you have questions on them. Public health. So you can see there's staff development within public health, the bottom of page 156. To answer your question, Supervisor Shirley, it's right there. So you can see they went from $3,780 to $32,775. That's all grant funded. Specifically for staff development. Other questions on public health?
Ken, if I may.
Yep.
So total expenses on 157, just extrapolating from 2022 to 2023, we're looking at like an 18% increase.
Yep.
Is there any way we can trim this down, or is it all grant funded, or we get down to revisit it in 2024? And
Yep. So pop back up to the top of page 156, and you'll look at the general property taxes. So it went from 728 to 780.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that $50,000 is what the taxpayers are increasing. Everything else is grant funded. And so there are still a lot of grants coming into public health, post COVID pandemic here. There's still a lot of monies flowing out there. And a lot of them are hitting in public health here to tackle certain things. So what I always say, though, is when the grant ends, the expense will end. You can guarantee that I do watch that. All right, we'll move on then. After public health is behavioral health. So 4310. Starting on page 158 of the budget book. The thing with behavioral health and the ADRC was there was a transfer of positions from behavioral health to the ADRC. So when we see some of the increases in ADRC, they were decreases that came out of behavioral health. I know that makes the comparability from prior years very difficult, but it's a transition year, and you guys will just have to get over it. Yeah.
To that effect, is that where you also see the downward trend on pulling from the general property tax in this budget?
Yeah, it's just transferred to
because that's going to go to the other side and that's
Yeah.
going to go up. Okay.
Right. Yeah, so don't yell at Kristen about her ADRC increase. It's not all her fault. It was a transfer. We actually transferred adult protective services out of behavioral health into the ADRC. So it was sort of a subdivision that was moved over. So it's the same functionality. They just shifted from one part to a different part. It's just a reporting structure within HHS. No other questions. Behavioral health, how about CCS, 4320 Cost Center, starting on page 160. This cost center has 0 general property tax dollars supported to it, so any expenses you have would reduce the grant eligibility that we have. So, moving on to 4410 economic support. They had a presentation at HHS last week, really great presentation that Rhonda Brown had made. They have a very little footprint for general property taxes. They're mostly grant funded. Any questions on 4410 cost center though, page 162, 163? Yep, Supervisor Shirley.
The purchase services, is that one of those that went to EDRC?
No, so you're looking at,
There's a big decrease.
yeah. Yeah. The what contract? Home energy assistance. It was a contract that went away. Yep. See, takes a good team to support me. All right. Questions then on page 164, Children's Services. I will preface Children's Services with, we're at 103 children in protective service right now. That's a new record for us, I think. I think it's the first time we've broken 100 in St. Croix County, what I've been told. So that's not a good thing. As the population increase, so do the service demands, though. And unfortunately, this is one of the areas that's really extrapolating quickly, and it's extremely expensive. They do not, the state does not give us adequate resources to cover these expenses. So this is an area that you're going to continue to see a lot of pressure. Quite frankly, if we had money for additional positions, this would probably be one that we look at. So for the 103 children that are in the system right now, we have 7 staff that are working on their caseload.
These are the people who'd benefit from CASA, the special advocates that Judge Waterman is wanting to provide for. So I'd just like you to think about that. Thank you.
Did you have any specific questions on line items within Children's Services? All right. 4610 Cost Center is the Aging and Disability Resource Center. This is the one that took over that subdivision from behavioral health. So some of the increases you're seeing are from that. Are there other questions, though, within the ADRC? Page 166, 167. Alrighty. The last cost center for Health and Human Services then is their administration division. So on page, yep. Oh, that's okay.
I see a circle in my book.
Yeah.
Catered food went from 100,000 to 200,000.
Yep. So you'll see that the other line item, food purchased, went down. So we changed service delivery at the meal sites. So we went from preparing the meals on site to bringing the food in pre-prepared. So we were able to reduce staff, reduce raw food costs, but it increases then catering services. We actually ended up with a very small savings with that methodology change. Yep. All right. So 4920, starting on page 169, is the administration division of HHS. Yep, Supervisor Shirley.
Purchase services, is that amount that we had budgeted still waiting to come in, or are we just not spending that?
It just hasn't been spent. Part of that is
Prior years of the prior years of the
Jocks are using some of that money for the upgrade of the chronic health records.
Yeah. Yeah, yep, absolutely. I was just trying to paraphrase it in my own mind first. So she says that they will be spending it. So some of the software upgrades is where that's coming in from. So that's probably not at 200,000 every year then.
No.
Yeah. So it's an increase over last year and this year as we're changing out a couple of the different electronic systems that we have at HHS.
So in the future, that looks like going down?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an ARPA offset for that. That's actually being funded by ARPA, though. All right. So the next tab then is tab 22, which is the healthcare center. So none of the expenses within the healthcare center are being paid for through the operating levy of the county. The revenues that the healthcare center generates are sufficient to cover their operating expenses. You'll actually see a negative fund balance applied. That negative fund balance applied, as you can see there on page 173, is how much additional revenue they're anticipating bringing in over expenses. Now, these budgets are set at full capacity, so we budget at full capacity. That's why they're bigger than what our traditional experience has been. So we always anticipate that we're going to fill the place up. We, though, staff at the level of the service demand. So we don't hire all the staff to service empty rooms. We hire the staff, quite frankly, we bring in the rooms as soon as we find staff to service them. It's really how it's working. So we're not going to have the expense without the revenue side. And Sandy does an excellent job of managing that ratio. Yep. So if there's any questions on the healthcare campus, I'd be happy to answer them. But like I said, it's a futuristic looking at the budgeting.
Question on our debt service on that. How many years do we have left? I know it's in the chart somewhere, but.
Yeah, so that debt was taken out in 2016, 20-year debt, so 2036. Coming not right up. But yeah. What year did you? 2036. Yeah. You can take a look at the chart. It's on the chart here. $2035 will be our last payment. All right. No other questions on healthcare campus. Tab 23 is veteran services. Phil wasn't able to be here today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. He really has a pretty small budget, though. No questions on veteran services. We'll look at Register of Deeds under tab 24, starting on page 193 of your budget book. Register of Deeds brings in more fees than they spend in expenses, so Beth always likes to make sure we point that out. All right, moving on, tab 25, community development. So again, community development is broken into several cost centers, so we'll take them one cost center at a time. So the first cost center on page 198 is the Parks Department. Are there any questions on pages 198 or 199? Oh, Supervisor Shirley.
Other professional services.
So every year in parks, we do a wide variety of what I would call medium projects. They're not things that end up on the capital improvement fund. They're not things that are small enough to go into our other line items when we hire outside people to do them. We do most of those projects in the fall after the parks close for the majority of the year. So like, for instance, I know it says 1228. I've already spent 70,000 of that. in the last, not all the bills have come in, but I have 70,000 for sure, and I have another 2 bills. I'm absolutely confident it'll be close to 90,000, if not higher. And these are things, if you'd like to know what they are, for instance, one of the things we did is we hired someone to level campsites that we're getting complaints about. We like to keep those very level. People don't like it when they have to do a lot of putzing around. Another thing, electrical pedestals, they get hit, banged up. We have 11 of them we're replacing this year. Or at least having the electrician come in and fix them up. The Wildwood Trail, we've done some brushing, try to keep the overgrowth down there. If you go down, you'd be just shocked at how fast it grows. We do brushing every couple years. Another thing we do down there is bring limestone screenings in, keep replacing the surfacing. Those are all things that will end up costing thousands of dollars, and we don't do it all ourselves. We have someone else bring it in. We decided this year, we had a lot of requests for a new project we're going to do next year, mostly next year, but we had the opportunity to have it done this year by the Highway Department. We added a little gravel parking lot because we're going to put in a fenced dog run, because we do allow dogs at our campground. It's one of the things that a lot of campgrounds don't do, and people have asked, but they have to be on a leash the whole time. And they said they might stay longer if we had a little dog run. So we have an area picked out. We're going to put that in next year. All that's going to cost money. The parking lot probably costs about $6 to $11,000. We've only gotten half the bill. Next year the fencing will cost more. We're always trying to improve our operations to make it better for our visitors with little projects like that. So those are a few examples. Sure.
What are the services that we provide during the wintertime at our parks?
We keep Glen Hills County Park open all year, and a lot of people go in there for ice fishing. We did try last year to have our camper cabin open. We're going to try it again this year, but it does involve plowing and more work for our staff, so we're debating that. We've talked about hike-in camping, but we do turn off all water facilities and cut down all stuff like that. So. And we have, obviously, the Loop Trail we're keeping open last year, and we're doing it again this year, working with the City of Stillwater to plow a minimal amount. And then Homestead was kept open last year, but again, plowing a very small parking lot because that adds to our staff costs. Any other questions on that one?
I'd want to point out the Loop Trail is per snow event, and last year it was less than $3,000.
Correct, but that it is going to go up. I've already talked to the City of Stillwater, the prices, and they're going to do, it's going to be a little less frequently.
Okay.
That's what they want. Sorry, bring that up. Other questions on this budget?
There may well be, but can we just hang out for a second? Any other questions on parks then, 5210? Supervisor Bernier.
Yeah, on that 100,000, do you need the entire 100,000 for next year? Are you willing to bring that down 5 to 10?
Sure, you can bring it down 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Man, should press for more.
No, no.
Yeah, all right, so reducing other professional services on page 198 from 100,000 to 95,000. Want to show me a preference? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Absolutely.
All right, any other questions on parks? We'll move on to her next cost center, 6110, Resource Land and Water Conservation on page 200.
question. I know that during COVID, we had a massive increase in park usage. Could we look at maybe utilizing Adam more with that money that he's getting to get people to come to the parks more, because we have a significant decrease in park revenue? Something along those lines?
So there are two factors why we had a decrease in park revenue this year, at least in my opinion. We do have an internal staff in our department who does a lot of outreach, and we really promote our parks extensively. And we'd be love to have Adam help us even more, but he's
Busy.
He's a very, very busy man. So anyway, I believe the two reasons are, one, we had to close down in order to build the new group camp. The old group camp was behind it, so we had to close that whole section down while the contractors have been there all summer. So that area of 17 campsites has not generated any revenue all year. Second thing that happened is, I did report this to our community development committee, but we had 5 of our fee safes in 2 different events stolen. Like pulled them out, they're all cemented in, ripped them out. When self-pay stations, people stole them and took the money, of course. That's the whole point. I don't think they wanted fee safes, but.
The safes cost more than the money that was inside.
I doubt that, but personally, they cost a $250 to $300 a piece, not including all the installation, and we have replaced them, but we were already doing it, but we're going to move to a QR code approach where people can all pay with their phones. We're going to try to cut way, way down. That's actually another expense that's coming out of like that $100,000 is buying new things this year. So, did you want me to write something?
No.
Thank you, Ellen, for addressing that.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions then on parks? All right. We're good with that? All right. Yep, moving on to resource, land, and water on page 200. I'll move on to page 203, zoning, which is the 6410 cost center. Any questions on any of those expenses? Yep, Supervisor Shirley.
Other professional services again.
Yep. All right. Bottom of page 203.
Yep. So again, sometimes bills, the way they come in, function differently. This year, that amount is up to $48,000, and I expect it to go to at least $75,000, $80,000. You can see I kept it the same as last year. We could drop it $5,000 again if you'd like, but I do know that these are different. These are projects again this year. We are doing the county comp plan. We did the survey. We got that kind of thing out of there. We actually look whether or not we need additional outside services. And I've been contracting with 2 different sources for outside services. That all comes out of this, and that will continue when it comes to training. We ramped up our training for our staff this year, and we have a very generous training budget, staff development, but you can see we're actually over that $8,000. Because we've been encouraged to expand our training. We've had enough turnover, we've had to do that, so. Cara.
I appreciate your willingness to say we can drop things 5,000, but from a budgeting perspective, I really don't think it's a wise idea for us to do that when we have staff who are saying we're going to be close to that amount of money. We have no idea, costs are going up with inflation for contractors and things like that next year. So if we have staff that are saying, well, I think it's going to be close, I just don't think it's a good idea for 2023.
Is there any requests there? All right.
No, thanks for the offer, but I think a lot of the things you're doing to modernize, to make it, yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll move on then to cost center 3650 on page 205, recycling. This has no tax levy support. This is the grant. It's how we spend the grant. Wait, no questions on that. The next page then, 3660 is our hazardous waste. This is the hazardous waste collection that we do. Any questions on page 206? Yep, Supervisor Shirley.
Just a comment, and I've made this before, but we know that our service costs for this hazardous waste collection are going up this year, and it's significant enough. But I think that we need to, I know that we don't necessarily like that, but I know that we need to offset that somehow. I would propose we increase fees on that we're charging people.
Okay. No. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to tab 26 then, which is UW Extension. Any questions on pages 209? Now we'll move to tab 27, which covers other support agencies. So the first one is 5110, which is the library. This dollar amount you can see is changed from requested to recommended. That includes the library hotspots. So your budget books are probably saying 1105216. The current version is at $113,922. That was an amendment requested by the administration committee, and it'll be on the county board agenda right before the budget next Tuesday. The next cost center then within here is the fairgrounds. So on page 214 of your budget book is the $80,000 we provide to the fair board to operate the St. Croix County Fair. There's no questions on that one. The third and last one under this tab is 6710, Economic Development. This is the contract we have with St. Croix Economic Development Corporation to provide economic development support in St. Croix County. And the $1,500 is a Momentum West membership, which is a more regionalized economic development support organization. Any questions on them? All right. Tab 28 then is just the KIP plan. So that's been previously reviewed in depth. Those are the projects in 2023 that are slated then to begin. So with this budget approval next week, those department heads are going to start working on those projects and getting them lined up for 2023. 24 through 27 are still in the planning phases then. So we're working on planning for those projects. And then last is tab 29 on page 227 is where we had jumped to earlier, but I'll pause here because I think that you guys wanted to make a $400,000 adjustment on this page. Yep.
What are we at dollar amount?
$17,000.
417 then, towards the debt.
I'd like to remind you that I'd like to honor what Judge Waterman's asked for and fund CASA for at least that first year. And we talked about finding that money in this budget that we seem to have done. Also, reducing.
Well, you haven't because you've only cut $17,000. I can't add a $41,000 expense offset by $17,000 reduction. You guys are short. Now, the other application that you can do is you can apply fund balance, especially if you're only considering it as a one-time expense. That would be my recommendation if you really wanted to go 41,000. We'll do fund balance applied of the other $24,000.
I was about to ask for that.
Yep.
About to ask for the fund balance.
Yeah.
Just thinking of the kids.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think there's two things outstanding here yet. What you want to do with CASA dollar-wise, and what we want to do with fund balance applied to the debt service. So I'm open to requests at this point, specifically that we can vote on. I'm going to start with Chair Long.
I'm concerned about transferring the entire 400 because I know that we've talked a lot about the staff increases that are going to be needed in 2024, and I think it would be prudent for us to at least plan for that a little bit to give us a little more flexibility for 2024. So maybe we do 200 instead of the full 400, just as a compromise.
You have to decide it by next Tuesday at 8:30.
Otherwise, I think we need a special county board meeting before the end of November to have the budgets approved. I don't think I'm wrong.
I guess we're all here, and we're going to be together on Tuesday, so I don't see any reason that we can't finalize this and get it done by next Tuesday morning. I might suggest then if we take 200 out of the fund balance and then deduct the extra 24 that we need for CASA funding and apply the rest to debt service as a compromise. That would be my suggestion or recommendation.
So apply $200,000 of fund balance to the debt service fund to reduce the tax levy. Fund CASA by $41,000, using the $17,000 in cuts that we have, and fund balance for the other $24,000. Was that what you said?
That's a good variation.
Shouldn't those be separated items?
Absolutely. If you want to take them separate, one at a time, we can do that too.
Yeah, I'd like Roy to come back up really quick and let's talk about CASA, the original reason why or how we brought this here. Thanks, Roy. My understanding was it was going to be privately funded. Now all of a sudden the needle's turned and you're coming to the county to ask for money. What's going to change between this year and next year other than the age of the program? I mean, I think there needs to be a concerted effort, more of a concerted effort, and I would be willing to pledge time to help with that in raising money outside of using taxpayer dollars right now to get this going, because that was the original plan, and I'd like to stick to that until there's like desperation. And I don't think we're at a desperate point. We can move fund balance at any time, but what we did here today can be utilized to give some relief to what's coming on the increase in taxpayers. Our taxpayers are seeing inflation too, and that's all I'm saying. But is that not the original agreement?
So you said a lot there. Let me respond to it.
I did. I'm sorry, Roy. So the original agreement was having it privately funded.
Well, there was no such agreement like that. The administration committee about 3 years ago answered the call and allotted $50,000 as startup money. Beyond that, we were a new nonprofit organization. Took us a couple of years to get up and running. Our initial executive director quit on us cold. That set us back. I plowed in a ton of my time to keep the thing afloat. So then basically a year passed with no grant requests outstanding or anything like that. The budget that I just gave to you, and I have an extra copy of the budget for all of you if you want for the next year for our CASA program, shows that we're going to be asking for about $180,000 of revenue for next year, of which about $120,000, $130,000 is grants from foundations. So if you look at our budget, you'll see that they're expected to come in next year. We just got turned down by Otto Bremer Foundation. We had asked them for $15,000. They said no. So what we're experiencing is we're going to collect about 80% of our grants. So the budget I gave you actually shows us having a surplus for next year of about $30,000. But if we only collect on 80% of our grants, we're break even. Next year, if we hire the people that we're planning on hiring, we're going to need additional staff. We're going to have at least one more part-time person who trains and keeps track of all of our volunteers. So we're going to be, at the end of this year, about 18 volunteers. That takes a lot of training. I went through the training process. It's 30 hours, and then every year after that, it's 12 hours. So our budget for next year, as I provided to you a corrected copy, and we're about to finalize that. Our budget for next year plans on, yes, the $50,000 of support from the county, kind of as and I was hoping to get $50,000 as a support for 3 years, because we heard other communication today, other discussion that some of the grants that we get for other programs, it's a 3-year, let's take a look at how this thing's going. Is it a good program or not good program? If you fund us for this 1 year, we'll show you whether we're worth the money for you. Hopefully the judges have come and talked to you all about the value of the program, as have the caseworkers. There's only 7 of those social workers out there. They've said to us that we are just a dynamic improvement for their quality of information that they have. So what I'm asking for is, yes, a one-time, I was hoping for a 3-year lift, but a one-time way of having a partnership with you all, because you are who we serve. That's all. We're all a bunch of volunteers. We train other volunteers, and we think the county's getting a big bang for the buck on this. Economically, maybe even next year we'll start to show that some of these kids get placed faster than they would otherwise. That's the savings. If you're not writing out checks for child support and other things like that, and for foster care, you're saving money. So you might have heard that presentation by the Wisconsin CASA director. She herself said that investment in CASA pays for itself, not the first year. So that's what we're trying to do, is get to the point where we can show you that we're economically good investment for the county. Where will we be in 2 years? Hopefully we're all going to be foundation, right. That's where I'm hoping to be, but I'm not there this year. And I want to tell my executive director, who's doing a stand-up job, that the county's standing up for him this year. So give us the funding for next year, please, and I'll come back to you and I'll show you how we're doing.
So just to follow up to that, my comment would be, like, I think the administration committee should take a deep dive into this, and we can always amend the budget down the road to have this. But I think we need to dive in more. That's my 35 cents worth.
And I remember the vote of this group, 13-5, saying that you would be willing to support us. So thank you.
Great. I think it'd be prudent to take the CASA question first to see if that money is used, and then address the debt service application to fund balance. So what dollar amount, if any, would you like me to place into the budget for CASA? Supervisor Osnes suggests 41,000. Right. To get to 41,000, I will apply the $17,000 in savings that you guys have identified today, and then $24,000 of fund balance to get us to the 41. So, question is, do you support that proposal or not? All right, thank you. That was approved. All right. So then that takes us to page 227 here, which is the amount of fund balance that you would like to apply to the debt service fund. Is there a dollar amount that somebody would like to suggest for that? Supervisor Hanson? 2 million? 200,000. It's the big one. 200,000 going once. Yeah. All right, let's vote on 200,000.
Can I ask what
Yeah,
is the
go ahead.
total benefit then to the taxpayer going forward?
Yeah. Let me make a calculation here for you.
That's my total point too, Rick, is how much are we actually saving the taxpayers if we cut $200,000 off? I mean, so far the $17,000 saved every man, woman, and child in St. Croix County just about 18 cents. So are we doing this as a token? Does it really make us feel good to take $200,000 away? Or should we leave it, forget that whole idea, let the administrator do his administration?
Yeah, it's a half of 1%. At 200,000, it comes out to 0.004.
I would point out, I'm throwing 200,000 out as a compromise. But it is a token.
Yeah, and Supervisor Hanson, that compromise is appreciated. Thank you. It's something, at least for right now, because not only is the county facing inflation, but the county residents are facing inflation. And if every governmental body did $100, $500, $1,000, $200,000, $500,000, just think if that happened from the top all the way down, how much relief our residents would have. We're going to do our part a little bit, taking a few hours of our time, and thank you again, department heads, for being a part of this. But I don't know about all of you, but my neighbors and my friends and my family members are getting crushed. Food prices, gas, not able to get parts for vehicles for repairs, like, name it. It's crazy. So anything we can do, I'm not going to apologize for inconveniencing anyone today for doing this. This was a good exercise. And I think that, and I'm just going to take a second here, so thank you for indulging me, but I really do appreciate all 18 of the 19 showing up, all the department heads, our Administrator Witt, our Corp Counsel, our County Clerk. Like, this is 4 hours of our time that we won't get back, but this is 4 hours that we took time to understand what it is that we're going to be voting on Tuesday. And that's something that in the 3 years, this is my third budget, we haven't dove in this deep before. So thank you all for doing this. And downplay, upplay, whatever it is, I think our constituents are going to appreciate the fact that we took a fine-tooth comb to this. So thank you all for obliging those of us that wanted this.
Supervisor Hanson.
First of all, I'd like to know the number that you were just
You'll
calculating.
save
And then
the average household $3.27.
Per year?
Yeah, it's a one-time savings.
Okay, so every $3 counts. So I guess you're right. And then I have a couple of comments because I need to respond to Paul's Supervisor Burning's thoughts. This meeting is tremendously expensive, probably cost the county upwards of $5,000 or $6,000. And every $5,000 or $6,000 counts too. I also know, because I am related to people who work for government, that this kind of exercise is really hard on morale. People who have been really sweating over this budget for the last 6 or 7 months take it very personally when we do this exercise at the very last minute. We've had the privilege to do this exercise at any step of the way during committee meetings or over the last, and I know we got the budget book just before the last meeting and we could have done better, but we could have taken this apart line by line at our committee meetings. We need to trust our committee process, and we need to ask the hard questions earlier in the process. So next year, we need to do due diligence more thoroughly so that we don't have to spend this kind of money this late in the process.
Thank you for those comments. Administrator Witt, if you want to get a feeling on, I think the numbers on the floor are 200,000 reduction, if you want to get a feeling for that.
$200,000 reduction to debt service. Right, and that's approved. All right. That wraps it up. So we do have just a few handful of changes that I'll be making. I will be updating the electronic version of the budget. As soon as I'm done with that, I should be able to finish that before the end of the day tomorrow. I will update the county board packet with the newest version and update on the county website the latest version of the budget. So you'll be able to see it out there in either of those two locations. And that's where we stand at this point.
And what was that number again?
327.
327?
Just a quick comment before we go, and I know this isn't the place where we necessarily need to make this change or do a motion for it, but next year for our packet that we get, I would really like to see this end of August so that we have time to really go through it the way that we did without having to do this last minute. And I know that some of that stuff from the state comes in late. Even if it's 3/4 of the way done, I would appreciate that more than doing this later.
Yeah, so a completed budget book, beginning of October is the soonest that I can get a bound book with all the supporting pieces in there. What I do provide at all of the September committee meetings is the line item details broken into the 5 sections, which make up the bulk of what we went over today. So all of those pieces are generally available by about the end of August. So I can get you that digital file. I just won't have all the pretty pictures and charts and stuff. It'll have all the line item detail at the department head level requested. So absolutely.
If there are no other comments, and if the administrator is done, I want to thank everybody for being here this morning, just echoing the comments that were just made by others. Thank you, Administrator Witt and your staff. Are there any other comments? Hearing none, business items are over. Any future agenda items for consideration? Seeing none, correspondence? Any comments? Seeing none, we're adjourned at 11:26.